The lake had been in Marcus Webb's family for 3 generations: crystal water, ancient oaks, and 17 acres of peace. But when the Riverside HOA started treating it like their private resort, bringing jet skis, hosting parties, and littering his shoreline, Marcus installed a single chain across the access road. What happened next turned a property dispute into a war that would expose decades of corruption, destroy political careers, and prove that sometimes the quietest man holds all the power. Because Marcus didn't just own the lake. He owned the only road to reach it. Part 1. The breaking point. Marcus Webb stood at his kitchen window, watching another convoy of SUVs roll past his property toward the lake. 6 vehicles this time, packed with coolers, inflatable toys, and enough alcohol to stock a small bar. He counted 14 people spilling out onto the shore, his shore, within minutes of parking. The lake had been in his family since 1947. His grandfather had bought the land when it was nothing but scrub brush and mosquitoes, built the cabin with his own hands, and spent 50 years turning it into paradise. Marcus had inherited it 12 years ago, along with the memories of summers spent fishing with his father, learning to swim off the old dock, and listening to his mother read on the porch while crickets sang in the twilight. Now it looked like a spring break destination. "Here again?" his wife Sarah said, coming up behind him. Her voice was tight with frustration. "That's the 3rd time this week." Marcus watched a man crack open a beer and toss the can onto the ground, just tossed it. "Didn't even look for a trash bag. I'm calling the sheriff," Sarah said, reaching for her phone. "Don't." Marcus's voice was quiet but firm. "Won't do any good." She lowered the phone. "Marcus, they're destroying everything. Your grandfather's dock is covered in scratches from their jet ski. Someone drove over the wildflower bed your mother planted. They left trash everywhere last weekend. I found broken glass in the swimming area." "I know. Then do something." Marcus turned away from the window. At 53, he was a quiet man, methodical and careful. He'd spent 30 years as a civil engineer, designing roads and bridges, understanding property law and easements better than most lawyers. People mistook his silence for weakness. They were usually surprised to learn otherwise. "I am doing something," he said. "I'm thinking." Trouble had started 18 months ago when the Riverside Estates development went up 2 miles down the county road. Luxury homes, manicured lawns, and an HOA with more rules than the IRS. The development's marketing materials featured the lake prominently. Pristine waterfront access, they'd called it, despite the fact that the lake was entirely on Marcus's property. The developer, Richard Hartley, had assumed the lake was public. An easy mistake for someone who hadn't checked the property records. By the time he realized his error, he'd already sold 43 homes with promises of lake access. Hartley had come to Marcus with an offer, $50,000 for an access easement. Marcus had declined. The lake wasn't for sale, not for any price. It was family, history, legacy. Hartley had returned with $100,000, then $200,000, then threats disguised as warnings about property values and good neighborly relations. Marcus had stopped returning his calls. Now the residents of Riverside Estates simply acted like they owned the place. They drove across Marcus's land on the old service road, technically a private road but unmarked, and treated the lake like a community pool. The HOA president, a lawyer named Bradley Morrison, had even sent Marcus a letter explaining that since the road had been publicly used for over a year, it was now subject to prescriptive easement laws. Marcus had laughed when he read that. Morrison clearly didn't understand that prescriptive easements required at least 10 years of continuous use in this county, not 1. But the arrogance of the letter had stuck with him. These people actually believed they could take what wasn't theirs through sheer entitlement. "I'm going down there," Sarah said, heading for the door. Marcus caught her arm gently. "Let me handle this." "Handle it how?" "By watching them trash everything your family built." "By making 1 phone call." He pulled out his cell and dialed a number he'd looked up 3 weeks ago. It rang twice. "Metzger Fencing and Gates, this is Tom." "Tom, this is Marcus Webb. We spoke last month about installing a security gate. I'm ready to move forward." Sarah's eyes widened. "Marcus, I need it done by Friday," Marcus continued. "Money's no object. Can you do it?" There was a pause. "This is the Lake Access Road project, the one with the complicated property boundaries." "That's the one." "The road is entirely on my property. I have the surveys. I want a lockable gate at the county road entrance, heavy-duty with concrete posts set 8 feet deep, and a chain barrier as backup." "Can do Friday. I'll have a crew there Thursday to prep the site." "Perfect. Send me the contract." Marcus ended the call and looked at his wife. She was staring at him with something between shock and admiration. "Going to lock them out," she said. "It's my road, my property, my lake." "They're going to lose their minds." "Probably. Morrison will sue him. I've got 3 generations of deeds, surveys, and property tax records. He's got entitlement and a law degree. Sarah stepped closer, studying her husband's face. "You've been planning this since the day Morrison sent that letter." Marcus returned to the window. Down at the lake, someone had started a portable speaker. Music echoed across the water, scaring away the herons that nested in the shallows. "I gave them chances to do the right thing, to ask permission, to respect the property. They chose to take instead. What happens when they show up on Saturday and find a gate?" Marcus smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Then they learn a lesson their parents should have taught them. Not everything belongs to you just because you want it." Thursday morning arrived with cloud cover and the sound of heavy machinery. Marcus watched from his porch as Tom Metzger's crew unloaded a 15-foot steel gate, welding equipment, and enough concrete to anchor a ship. The gate was beautiful in its simplicity. Black powder-coated steel, impossible to climb, with a lock that could withstand a battering ram. By Thursday evening, it was installed and secured. Marcus stood before it with the only key in his pocket, looking at the chain-link fence extending into the woods on either side. Tom had done excellent work. Nothing was getting past this barrier without his permission. Sarah brought him coffee as the sun set. "No turning back now." Never wanted to turn back. "They'll be here Saturday morning, expecting to use the lake." Marcus sipped his coffee, watching the last of the daylight fade over his family's land. Then Saturday morning is when they learn what private property actually means. Saturday came with perfect weather, 80 degrees, clear skies, ideal for the lake. By 9 a.m., the first vehicles appeared on the county road, slowing as they approached the new gate. Marcus watched from his truck parked 50 yards away on his property. He wanted to see their faces. The first SUV stopped. A man got out. Marcus recognized him as one of the regular weekend visitors and approached the gate with confusion turning rapidly to anger. He pulled on the chain, kicked the post, pulled out his phone. Within 20 minutes, there were 11 vehicles backed up on the county road. Families in swimsuits, coolers packed with food, kids crying because they couldn't understand why the lake was blocked. And standing in the middle of it all, red-faced and furious, was Bradley Morrison. Marcus waited until Morrison was shouting into his phone before starting his truck. He drove slowly to the gate, window down, expression neutral. Morrison spun toward him. "Webb." "What the hell is this?" Marcus got out of his truck, taking his time. "This is a gate. You can't block public access." "There is no public access. This is private property, always has been." "Have rights, prescriptive easement." Marcus pulled a folded document from his pocket. "This is a survey from 1952. This is the deed from 1947. This is last year's property tax statement. The road is mine, the land is mine, the lake is mine. You have exactly 0 rights here." Morrison's face went from red to purple. "You can't do this. 43 families bought homes with lake access. Then they should sue the developer who lied to them. Not my problem. We'll take you to court. Please do." Marcus's voice remained calm, almost pleasant. "I'll enjoy watching you explain to a judge why you think 18 months of trespassing gives you legal claim to someone else's property." A woman pushed forward from the crowd. "We have children. They've been swimming here all summer without permission. On private land. You're being ridiculous." Marcus looked at her steadily. "I'm being a property owner. You're being entitled. There's a difference." Morrison stepped closer, trying to use his height. He was 6'2" to Marcus's 5'9" as intimidation. "You think you're clever. You think this is over. I'll bury you in legal fees. I'll make your life hell." "Well, you'll go home," Marcus interrupted quietly. "Because if you set foot on my property, I'll have you arrested for trespassing. And if you damage this gate, I'll file criminal charges for destruction of property. Those are your options, counselor. Choose wisely." For a long moment, Morrison just stared at him. The crowd had gone silent, watching this standoff between the angry lawyer and the quiet engineer. Finally, Morrison jabbed a finger at Marcus's chest. "This isn't over." "It is." Marcus climbed back into his truck. "The lake's closed, Morrison, permanently." He drove back toward his cabin, leaving 43 families and their perfect Saturday plans on the wrong side of a locked gate. In his rearview mirror, he watched Morrison pull out his phone, already calling someone, probably a lawyer, maybe the press. Definitely someone he thought could fix this. Marcus knew better. He'd spent 3 weeks reviewing every property law, every easement regulation, every possible legal challenge. The gate would stand because the law was on his side. But more than that, it would stand because sometimes the quietest man is simply the one who knows exactly what he's doing. And Marcus Webb had just begun. Part 2. The siege. By Monday morning, Marcus's phone had 47 voicemails. He deleted them without listening. His email inbox had 63 messages from Riverside Estates residents, ranging from polite requests to barely veiled threats. He marked them as spam. The gate remained locked. Sarah read the local newspaper at breakfast, her expression darkening with each paragraph. "You're the lead story." "What's it say?" "Local man blocks lake access, families outraged." They interviewed Morrison. "He's calling you a hermit with a vendetta against children and recreation." She lowered the paper. There's a photo of a little girl crying at the gate. Marcus sipped his coffee. Staged? Absolutely. Her father's the one who drove his truck over your mother's wildflower bed. Then they picked the wrong child for sympathy. Doorbell rang. Marcus answered it to find a young woman with a microphone and a cameraman. Channel 7 News. Mr. Webb, I'm Jennifer Corso. Could we ask you a few questions about the lake controversy? No controversy. It's private property. Good day. He closed the door. The doorbell rang again immediately. Mr. Webb, the community just wants access to nature, don't you think? I think you're trespassing. Leave now or I'm calling the sheriff. Doorbell stopped ringing. Sarah came up behind him. That'll be on the evening news. Let them see I'm serious. But the media attention was just the beginning. By Tuesday, someone had created a Facebook group called Save Our Lake Access. Within 24 hours, it had 800 members. The posts ranged from organizing legal fund donations to discussing Marcus's property in ways that made Sarah triple-check the door locks at night. Calling you a selfish tyrant, she said, scrolling through her phone. Someone suggested slashing your tires. Another person wants to organize a protest at the gate. Them protest. It's a public road up to my property line. They can stand there all day if they want. Marcus, some of these messages are scary. Listen to this. Old man Webb thinks he can hide behind his fence. Time to show him what community justice looks like. The first time, Marcus felt a flicker of concern. Not for himself, but for Sarah. Maybe you should stay with your sister for a while. Absolutely not. I'm not leaving you alone with these lunatics. Wednesday brought the protest. 40 people showed up at the gate with signs reading public water for public use and end lake tyranny. The local news covered it extensively, interviewing tearful mothers who claimed their children were being denied basic recreation. None of them mentioned the municipal pool 15 minutes away, or the state park lake 20 miles north, or the fact that they'd been using someone else's property without permission for over a year. Marcus watched from his porch, binoculars in hand. He recognized most of the protesters, regular trespassers from the Riverside development. Morrison was there too, giving interviews and looking appropriately concerned about community well-being. He's good, Sarah admitted, watching the coverage. He's making you look like some antisocial monster. I don't care what I look like, I care what I own. Thursday brought the lawyers, 3 of them actually standing at his door with briefcases and serious expressions. The lead attorney was a woman named Patricia Vance, gray-haired and sharp-eyed. Mr. Webb, I represent the Riverside Estates Homeowners Association. My clients would like to discuss a reasonable compromise. Marcus leaned against the doorframe. What's reasonable to you? Weekend access during summer months, Memorial Day through Labor Day. We'd provide liability insurance, organize cleanup crews, maintain the shoreline, all at our expense. No, Vance's eyebrow rose. You didn't let me finish the offer. Need to, the answer's no. Mr. Webb, please be practical. You can't use an entire lake by yourself. 43 families bought houses based on false advertising. That's between them and their developer, not me. The second lawyer, a younger man named Patterson, stepped forward. We're prepared to pursue prescriptive easement claims, and will add causes of action for unjust enrichment. Your property value has increased due to the development's proximity. Marcus actually laughed. You want to argue I've been unjustly enriched because your client built houses near my lake without checking who owned it first? Good luck with that. We'll also file for lake access as a public necessity, Patterson continued. The county only has limited recreational water resources. A judge will determine that private property means private property. Marcus straightened up. But please file your motions. Give me something to show the countersuit judge. Vance's expression sharpened. Countersuit for trespassing, 18 months of documented illegal use of private property by multiple parties. I've got photos, videos, dates, times, license plates. I'm thinking. Let's see. 43 families times approximately 30 visits each times the statutory penalty for knowing trespass. He pretended to calculate. That's going to be an expensive settlement. 3 lawyers exchanged glances. Vance recovered first. You'd sue families, people with children, sue trespassers. If they happen to have children, they should have thought about that before repeatedly breaking the law on my land. You're making a mistake, Mr. Webb. Made exactly one mistake, Ms. Vance, tolerating this situation as long as I did. That ends now. Get off my porch. They left, but Marcus knew it wasn't over. People like Morrison didn't give up easily. They were used to getting what they wanted through pressure, legal maneuvering, and public opinion. They'd never encountered someone who simply didn't care what others thought. Friday brought the first act of vandalism. Marcus discovered it during his morning walk. Someone had spray-painted "selfish bastard" across his mailbox in red letters. The security camera he'd installed caught the perpetrator, a Riverside resident Marcus recognized from the protests. He called Sheriff Hayes. Marcus, I saw this coming, Hayes said, examining the footage. That's Tom Brennan. Moved here 6 months ago, already got 2 noise complaints against him. I'll bring him in. I want charges filed. It's just a mailbox. It's criminal mischief, federal property destruction, and it proves these people think they're above the law, Hayes sighed. You're poking a hornet's nest. The hornets poked me first. I'm just showing them what happens when you mess with the wrong person. By Friday evening, Tom Brennan was arrested and released on bail. The local news covered it as Lake Dispute turns criminal. The Facebook group exploded with outrage. Someone started a GoFundMe for Brennan's legal defense. Sarah found Marcus on the porch watching the sunset over his lake. Peaceful, quiet, the way it was supposed to be. Planning something, she said. The Facebook chatter is getting worse. Talk about direct action and teaching you a lesson. Let them try. Marcus, I'm serious. Some of these people are unhinged. He turned to look at her. Sarah, I spent 30 years building bridges and roads. You know what I learned? Structure matters, foundation matters, and rules matter. These people have spent their entire lives believing rules don't apply to them, that they're entitled to take what they want because they're them, important, wealthy, connected. What's your point? My point is they're about to learn that structure, foundation, and rules are stronger than entitlement, and I've got all 3 on my side. Saturday brought the breaking point. Marcus woke at 2 a.m. to the sound of engines, big engines. He grabbed his phone and pulled up the security camera feeds he'd installed around the property. 6 vehicles, including a large pickup with a winch, were approaching the gate. Sarah, call 911. He pulled on jeans and boots, grabbed his phone for recording, and headed for the door. Sarah caught his arm. Go out there. There's too many of them. They're on my property. I'm going. He took his truck, driving without headlights, approaching from the side road that curved around behind the gate position. By the time he got there, the group had already attached chains to the gate posts and were preparing to rip them out. Morrison was there. Of course he was. Standing back, directing operations, playing general. Marcus parked and got out, phone held high, recording. You're all being filmed. You're committing criminal trespass, conspiracy to commit property destruction, and criminal mischief. Leave now and I won't press charges. Morrison spun around, caught in the phone's video light. For a second, something dangerous flashed across his face. Then he composed himself. This is a public action against an unjust blockade. We have every right. You have the right to remain silent. Sheriff Hayes's voice cut through the darkness as his patrol car rolled up, lights flashing. 2 more patrol cars followed. Which I strongly suggest you exercise, counselor. Group froze. The man at the winch controls slowly raised his hands. Morrison looked like he'd been slapped. Hayes walked up to Marcus. Got your wife's 911 call. Good thing I was already patrolling nearby. He turned to Morrison. Brad, you're a lawyer. You know better than this. We're exercising our community rights. You're attempting to destroy private property. That's a felony. Hayes gestured to his deputies. Start taking names and vehicle plates. Everyone here is getting charged. This is harassment. This is law enforcement. Hayes looked at the chains attached to the gate. Who attached those? Silence. Okay, then everyone gets charged with conspiracy. Your choice. A younger man stepped forward, terrified. I did it. Tom Brennan asked me to, said it was legal, that we were just removing an illegal blockade. Hayes wrote in his notepad. Tom Brennan, same Tom Brennan I arrested last week for vandalizing Mr. Webb's mailbox. I guess. Where's Brennan now? The man pointed to one of the vehicles. Hayes walked over, shined his flashlight through the window, and pulled out his radio. Dispatch, I need you to check if Tom Brennan has any outstanding warrants. Violation of bail conditions. Got it. I've got him here now. Morrison stepped forward. Sheriff, this is a civil matter. No, counselor, this is 6 counts of attempted criminal mischief, conspiracy, and for Mr. Brennan, violation of bail conditions. Very criminal. Hayes looked at Marcus. You want to press charges? Every single one of them. You got it. Hayes raised his voice. Everyone against that gate, hands where I can see them. You're all under arrest. The next 30 minutes were chaos. People shouting about their rights, deputies reading Miranda warnings, Morrison on his phone trying to call in favors. And through it all, Marcus stood silent, filming everything, documenting every word. By the time the last patrol car pulled away, Tom Brennan in handcuffs in the back, dawn was breaking over the lake. Hayes walked up to Marcus, looking exhausted. You know this is going to get worse before it gets better. I know. Morrison's already calling the county attorney. He'll claim you provoked this somehow. Then he'll lose. I've got video of the whole thing. They brought chains and a winch. This was planned. Hayes nodded slowly. You're not wrong, but Marcus, these are powerful people, connected people. They'll come at you in ways you can't predict. Marcus looked at the gate, still standing, still solid. Let them. I'm not the one who blinked. By Monday, the arrests were front-page news. The Facebook group went into meltdown. Some members were calling for Morrison's resignation from the HOA. Others were doubling down, claiming the arrests were proof of police corruption and Marcus's tyrannical control over local law enforcement. But something had shifted. The comment sections were changing. People from outside Riverside Estates were weighing in, and they weren't sympathetic to the trespassers. Private property means private property. These entitled people actually thought they could tear down someone's gate. Good for Webb. Stand your ground. Sarah showed Marcus the comments over coffee. Public opinion is turning. Don't care about public opinion, only care about property rights. Well, property rights are about to get tested in court. Morrison filed his lawsuit this morning. Marcus smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. Good. Discovery's going to be very interesting for Mr. Morrison. Sarah set down her phone. What do you know that I don't? I know that I spent the last 3 weeks doing research, and I found something very interesting about Richard Hartley's development deal. Marcus pulled out a folder from his desk drawer. The original county approval required Hartley to provide recreational access for residents. He claimed he had an agreement with me for lake access, signed affidavits, submitted to the county. You never agreed to anything. Exactly. Which means Hartley committed fraud in his county applications. And Morrison, as HOA president, has been signing letters claiming legal access rights that don't exist. That's fraud too. Sarah's eyes widened. You're going to destroy them. I'm going to expose them. There's a difference. Marcus closed the folder. They wanted a war over property rights. I'm going to give them a legal lesson about the consequences of lying to government agencies. Tuesday brought a call from an unexpected source, Richard Hartley himself. Mr. Webb, I think we got off on the wrong foot. I'd like to meet with you, clear the air, discuss. Possibilities. Marcus leaned back in his chair. What possibilities? I made mistakes in my initial approach. I'm prepared to acknowledge that, and I'm prepared to make a very substantial offer for an access easement. $500,000. Interested. $750. Still not interested. There was a long pause. What do you want, Webb? Everyone has a price. I want you to admit you committed fraud in your county application. I want you to acknowledge you never had an agreement with me for lake access, and I want you to compensate the families you lied to about lake access. Hartley's voice turned cold. That's not going to happen. Then neither is your easement. Have a good day, Mr. Hartley. Marcus hung up and looked at Sarah. He's scared. He knows what I found. What happens now? Now we wait. Morrison's lawsuit will trigger discovery. I'll subpoena Hartley's county applications. Everything comes out. If they try something else, Marcus glanced out the window at his lake, peaceful in the afternoon sun. Then they'll learn that the man who owns the lake owns more than they think. Because Marcus had spent 3 weeks doing more than just researching property law. He'd been researching people, connections, money trails, and what he'd found was going to change everything. But that revelation would wait. First, he wanted them to take their best shot, to commit fully to their attack, to dig themselves in so deep they couldn't climb out. Only then would Marcus show them how far the quiet man had been planning, and how completely they had underestimated him. Part 3. Discovery. The subpoena landed on Richard Hartley's desk on a Wednesday morning, delivered by a process server who'd waited 2 hours to catch him at his office. Hartley read it 3 times, each reading making his face a deeper shade of red. He's requesting everything, Hartley said into his phone. His lawyer, Michael Stern, listened patiently from his downtown office. Every county application, every approval document, every communication about the Riverside development. That's standard discovery, Stern replied. We can fight to narrow the scope. Mike, you don't understand. If Webb gets those files. What's in those files, Richard? Hartley looked out his window at the city skyline. The truth. Across town, Marcus sat in his lawyer's office, watching Douglas Brennan, no relation to Tom Brennan, review the subpoena with professional satisfaction. At 65, Doug was a property law specialist who'd spent 40 years handling land disputes. He charged $400 an hour and was worth every penny. You buried the bomb in footnote 7, Doug said, admiring the document. Most lawyers won't even notice it until they're reading the actual county records. That's the idea. You want to tell me what we're going to find? Marcus pulled out his folder, now significantly thicker than a week ago. County Ordinance 47B requires any development over 20 units to provide recreational access for residents. Parks, pools, sports facilities, something. Hartley's application list shared waterfront access as the recreational component. Your lake. My lake. With attached affidavits claiming I'd agreed to negotiate an easement in good faith. The county approved the development based on those representations. Doug whistled softly. That's fraud, federal fraud if he used the mails or wire communications. I've got copies of the email submissions to the county planning board. How'd you get those? Freedom of Information Act request. Took 3 weeks, but every email Hartley sent to the county is public record. Marcus pulled out another document. This is my favorite. Hartley told the county I was enthusiastic about becoming part of the community, that I'd expressed interest in a long-term partnership arrangement. Did you ever meet with him? Once. He showed up at my door uninvited, offered $50,000, and I told him no. That was the extent of our relationship. Doug sat back, a slow smile spreading across his face. Oh, Richard Hartley is going to have a very bad year. Gets better. Morrison knew about the fraud. Marcus produced another document, a letter from Morrison to Hartley dated 8 months ago. Read paragraph 3, Doug read aloud. As we discussed, Webb's refusal to honor the access arrangement puts all homeowners at risk. The HOA position is that we purchased homes with explicit lake access guarantees, and any failure to deliver on those guarantees constitutes breach of contract. He looked up. Where'd you get this? Someone at Riverside Estates doesn't like Morrison very much. It showed up in my mailbox anonymously. It's explosive. Morrison knew there was no actual agreement. He's been threatening Hartley to fix it, which means he's been lying to the HOA members. Which means when this goes to court, both Hartley and Morrison are exposed. Marcus leaned forward. But I'm not interested in exposing them. I'm interested in ending this. What's your play? We offer a settlement. Not to Morrison. He's too proud and too stupid to see sense. We offer it directly to the Riverside HOA membership. We expose what Hartley and Morrison did, demonstrate they were lied to by their developer and their HOA president, and offer them a path forward. Doug considered this. What kind of path? Class action against Hartley for fraudulent inducement. They sue for the difference in property value between what they paid, assuming lake access, and what their homes are actually worth without it. Hartley pays, not me. I keep my lake. Forever. No easement, no access, no compromise. The gate stays locked. Doug was quiet for a long moment. That's cold, Marcus. That's fair. They're victims of fraud. I'm not the one who defrauded them. Some of those families have been using your lake for over a year. They think it's theirs. Then they need to learn different. Truth hurts sometimes. Doug nodded slowly. I'll draft the offer, but Morrison's going to fight this. His whole reputation is tied up in winning this case. Him fight. Every day this stays in court is another day the county investigates Hartley's fraud. Another day the HOA members realize Morrison lied to them. Another day I'm not backing down. You know they might come after you harder. Marcus thought about the spray-painted mailbox, the midnight attempt to tear down his gate, the threats in the Facebook group. They can try. The county investigation began Thursday. Marcus knew because a county inspector named Patricia Rodriguez called him to verify certain facts. Her voice was professional but tight with barely controlled anger. Mr. Webb, I need to confirm, did you ever sign any document, verbal or written, agreeing to provide lake access to the Riverside Estates development? Never. Richard Hartley ever discussed specific terms of an access arrangement with you? He offered to buy an easement. I declined. That was the extent of our discussion. You ever meet with county planning officials about this development? Not once. First I heard about it was when construction started. Rodriguez was quiet for a moment. Mr. Webb, I've been a county inspector for 19 years. I've seen a lot of corner cutting, a lot of creative interpretations of regulations. This isn't that. This is blatant fraud in a county application. Someone's going to jail. My concern, I just want my property rights respected. They will be. I'm recommending we revoke Hartley's occupancy permits until this is resolved. Marcus blinked. You can do that? If the development doesn't meet its approved recreational access requirements, and it clearly doesn't since you never agreed to anything, then it's not in compliance with County Ordinance 47B, no compliance, no occupancy. That would affect 43 families. Hartley should have thought about that before he lied to my office. Rodriguez's voice was hard. I don't like being used, Mr. Webb. And I really don't like developers who think they can commit fraud and hide behind it's just business. He made this mess. He can fix it or face the consequences. Marcus hung up feeling something unfamiliar, vindication, not just for himself but for the system. For the idea that rules actually mattered, that fraud had consequences, that you couldn't just buy or bully your way past the law. Friday brought Morrison's response to the subpoena, a motion to quash, arguing that the county documents were irrelevant to the easement claim and that Marcus was engaged in a fishing expedition designed to embarrass the HOA leadership. Doug called him with the news. Morrison's scared. This motion is desperate. Will the judge grant it? Not a chance. The county application is directly relevant to whether an easement exists. Morrison's just buying time. Him. Every delay costs him money and credibility. That evening, Marcus discovered the Facebook group had split. A second group had formed. Riverside Estates Truth. The description read, for residents who want facts, not propaganda about the lake access situation. Sarah showed him the posts. The tone was very different from the original group. Anyone else know Morrison was claiming we had guaranteed lake access? I just found the county documents through FOIA. Hartley lied to the county. We need to sue him, not Webb. Been researching property law. Webb is 100% in the right. We're the ones trespassing. The original Facebook group, still over 1,000 members, responded with fury. Morrison himself posted, "These are division tactics by Webb's supporters. Stand strong. Our rights are being violated." But the seeds of doubt had been planted. Saturday morning brought Marcus's most unexpected visitor yet, Christina Hartley, Richard's wife. She arrived alone, driving a Mercedes SUV, wearing sunglasses despite the overcast sky. She removed them at the door, revealing eyes red from crying. "Mr. Webb, I need 5 minutes of your time." Marcus had learned to be cautious. "Does your husband know you're here?" "No, and he'd be furious if he knew, but I can't." She took a shaky breath. "I can't watch him destroy everything we built. May I come in?" Sarah appeared beside Marcus, giving Christina a long, evaluating look before nodding. They sat in the living room, Christina perched on the edge of the sofa like she might bolt at any moment. "My husband lied to the county," she said without preamble. "I didn't know until last week. I found the emails, the fake affidavits, everything." "Tell me." "Because he's planning to lie again. He's meeting with county officials Monday, planning to claim there was a verbal agreement that you're now disputing. He's going to say you changed your mind after the development was complete." Marcus leaned forward. "That's perjury." "I know, and I can't be part of it. We have 3 children, Mr. Webb. Richard's so focused on winning this fight that he can't see he's going to lose everything. His license, his freedom, his family." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I've been married to him for 22 years. I've watched him cut corners before, bend rules, but this is different. This is criminal." Sarah handed her tissues. "What do you want Marcus to do?" "I want him to offer Richard a way out. One that doesn't involve prison, because if Richard goes down, my children suffer, and they don't deserve that." Marcus studied the woman across from him. She was terrified but resolute. Coming here was an act of betrayal against her husband and an act of protection for her family. "What kind of way out?" "Richard admits the fraud. Publicly. He pays restitution to the HOA members, returns part of their purchase prices to reflect the missing lake access. He agrees to never develop property in this county again." Christina met his eyes. "And you agree not to pursue criminal charges?" "I don't control the county investigation." "You could tell them you don't want to press charges. That would matter to the prosecutor." Marcus looked at Sarah. She gave a tiny shrug. "Your call." "Consider it," Marcus said finally. "On one condition." "Anything. Your husband provides written testimony about Morrison's involvement." Morrison knew this was fraud and pushed the HOA to pursue it anyway. "If Richard wants mercy, Morrison doesn't get to hide behind him." Christina nodded slowly. "Richard has emails, documents. He kept them as insurance in case Morrison tried to blame everything on him. Then we have a deal, sort of. I need to verify everything first. If Richard's telling the truth, if he cooperates fully, if he genuinely makes the HOA members whole, then I'll recommend leniency to the county. But if he lies one more time, if he tries to weasel out, the deal's off and I push for maximum charges." "That's fair." Christina stood, smoothing her dress. "Thank you, Mr. Webb, for being reasonable." "Not being reasonable, Mrs. Hartley. I'm being strategic. Your husband messed up. Morrison's been leading a harassment campaign against me. I want them both to face consequences, but I don't want your children to suffer for their father's stupidity." He walked her to the door. "Tell Richard he has until Monday at 9 a.m. to contact my lawyer. After that, the offer expires." After Christina left, Sarah turned to Marcus. "Do you trust her?" "No, but I trust that she's scared enough to do what's necessary." Marcus returned to the window, his habitual observation post. "Richard Hartley's about to learn that the cover-up is always worse than the crime." Morrison's about to learn that loyalty only flows downward. When the ship sinks, the captain always throws someone overboard. Sunday passed in tense silence. No word from Hartley. Marcus spent the day cataloging evidence with Doug's paralegal, building the criminal case just in case. Sarah stress-baked 3 pies. The house smelled like apples and cinnamon. At 8:47 p.m., Doug called. "Hartley just emailed me. He accepts your terms, wants to meet tomorrow at my office with his lawyer. He's bringing documents." He lawyered up. Michael Stern. "Good lawyer, which means Hartley's taking this seriously." "What about Morrison?" "No mention of him yet. But if Hartley's bringing documents about Morrison's knowledge, that conversation's coming." Monday morning arrived cold and gray. Marcus dressed carefully, collared shirt, pressed pants, his father's watch. Sarah kissed him at the door. "Be careful, cornered animals bite." Hartley's not cornered. He's just finally being smart. Doug's office was downtown, 11th floor, with a view of the river. Michael Stern was already there when Marcus arrived. 50-something, expensive suit, the look of a man who charged $700 an hour. Hartley sat beside him, looking like he'd aged 5 years in a week. "Gentlemen," Doug said, playing host. "Let's be clear about what we're doing here. This is a proffer session. Mr. Hartley, anything you say today is off the record unless you fail to honor the agreement we're discussing." "Understood." Hartley nodded. Stern placed a hand on his client's arm. My client is here in good faith to resolve this matter without further legal action. He acknowledges errors in judgment and is prepared to make restitution. Errors in judgment? Marcus's voice was flat. He committed fraud in county documents. That's not an error, that's a crime. Stern didn't flinch. Poor phrasing. My client acknowledges he made false statements in county applications and is prepared to face appropriate consequences, civil consequences, while avoiding criminal prosecution. Then start talking. For the next 3 hours, Hartley laid it out. The initial site survey that showed the lake entirely on Marcus's property. The realization that he'd already marketed lake access to prospective buyers. The decision to fudge the county application to claim an access agreement existed. I thought I could fix it later, Hartley said, his voice hollow. I thought once the development was built, you'd see the benefit of cooperating, that you'd accept a reasonable offer. You thought you could force my hand, Marcus corrected. You thought if 43 families were counting on lake access, I'd cave rather than be the villain. Hartley didn't deny it. The Morrison evidence was damning. Emails where Morrison, upon learning about the fraud 6 months ago, didn't advise the HOA to sue Hartley. Instead, he'd strategized ways to establish a prescriptive easement, encouraged residents to use the lake as much as possible, and drafted the legal threats sent to Marcus, all while knowing there was never a legitimate access agreement. He wanted to win, Hartley said. He kept saying if we could just establish enough of a pattern of use, if we could create enough public pressure, you'd either give in or a judge would force an easement. He said it was practical legal strategy. Marcus looked at Doug. Is that disbarment-level misconduct? Probably. Knowingly pursuing frivolous claims, misrepresenting facts to clients. Yeah, the Bar Association would be interested. Stern cleared his throat. Which brings us to our proposal. My client will 1. Submit a written admission of fraud to the county with a full account of events. 2. Offer to refund each Riverside homeowner $25,000 to compensate for the lack of lake access. 3. Resign from any development projects in the county. 4. Cooperate fully with any investigation into Mr. Morrison's conduct. Exchange for? Doug asked. Mr. Webb agrees not to pursue criminal charges and recommends to the county prosecutor that civil penalties are sufficient resolution. Marcus sat back, thinking. $25,000 per homeowner times 43 was over $1 million. That would hurt Hartley significantly. The fraud admission would ruin his reputation. The resignation clause would end his local business. It was almost enough. Want 2 more things, Marcus said. First, Hartley signs an affidavit stating unequivocally that I never agreed to provide lake access, that all marketing materials suggesting I did were false, and that he takes full responsibility for misleading the homeowners. Agreed, Stern said quickly. Second, Hartley pays for an independent structural inspection of my gate and fence to prove they're legally installed on my property. I want documentation that the gate is legitimate so this question never comes up again. Also, agreed. Marcus looked at Doug, who gave a small nod. It was a good deal. It punished Hartley, protected the innocent homeowners, and established Marcus's rights beyond dispute. Fine, draft the agreement. They spent 2 more hours hammering out details. By noon, documents were signed, escrow accounts established, and the trap set for Bradley Morrison, because Morrison didn't know Hartley had flipped. Morrison thought they were still allies, still fighting the tyrannical property owner together. He had no idea that every email, every document, every strategic conversation was now in Marcus's possession. Marcus left Doug's office and called Sarah. It's done. Hartley cooperated. What about Morrison? Marcus smiled. Morrison's about to have a very bad afternoon. At 2:37 p.m., Bradley Morrison received notice that he was being removed as HOA president by emergency vote of the board. At 2:58, he received Doug's letter explaining why, evidence of knowing fraud, misrepresentation to homeowners, and pursuit of frivolous legal claims. At 3:15, Morrison was on Marcus's doorstep, shaking with rage. You did this? You turned Hartley against me. Marcus stood in his doorway, calm as always. Hartley turned on himself. He committed fraud and finally got smart enough to accept consequences. Destroy you in court. You'll do nothing, counselor. Because if you file 1 more motion, make 1 more threat, send 1 more letter, I'm releasing your emails to the State Bar Association. The ones where you knowingly pursued claims you knew were baseless. The ones where you encouraged trespass on private property. The ones where you conspired with Hartley to cover up fraud. Morrison's face went white. You can't. Those are privileged. They're not privileged when they're evidence of fraud. Ask your lawyer. Or don't. You're about to need a lawyer for yourself. This isn't over. It is. Go home, Morrison. You lost. A long moment Morrison just stood there, a man watching his career, his reputation, his power crumble. Then he turned and walked away, shoulders slumped, defeated. Sarah appeared beside Marcus. Think he'll actually stop? He doesn't have a choice. The HOA board fired him, Hartley threw him under the bus, and I've got enough evidence to end his career if he tries anything else. Marcus watched Morrison drive away. The war's over. You win. Marcus looked past the driveway to his lake, sparkling in the afternoon sun. Quiet, peaceful, his. I kept what was mine, that's all I wanted. But even as he said it, Marcus knew the real aftermath was just beginning, because 43 families still lived in Riverside Estates. Hartley's settlement would help, but it wouldn't give them the lake access they'd been promised. Some would accept reality, others would harbor resentment. And resentment, Marcus knew, could be more dangerous than rage. The question was, what would they do with it? Part 4. The reckoning. The settlement checks arrived in mailboxes throughout Riverside Estates on a Tuesday morning. $25,000 each, accompanied by a letter from Richard Hartley's attorney explaining the fraud, apologizing for the misrepresentation, and formally releasing all claims to lake access. The letter ended, Mr. Marcus Webb has never agreed to provide lake access and has no legal obligation to do so. Your purchase contracts with Hartley Development Corp. have been amended to reflect this reality. We deeply regret the confusion and inconvenience. By noon, the Riverside Estates Truth Facebook group had exploded with reactions. $25,000. Our house is lost at least $50,000 in value. I'm calling a lawyer. This isn't enough. Least Hartley admitted the truth. Webb doesn't owe us anything. Should be thanking Webb. Are you serious? He's kept a public resource locked up. The split in the community deepened. Roughly half the residents accepted the settlement as fair compensation for Hartley's fraud. The other half saw it as blood money, a bribe to make them accept Marcus's tyranny. Sarah monitored the Facebook drama while Marcus worked in his shed, repairing an old fishing rod. The moderates are gaining ground, she reported. Several people are pointing out that you were right all along, that they should be angry at Hartley and Morrison, not you. What about the others? They're not taking it well. Someone suggested everyone should refuse the settlement checks to maintain unified leverage. Marcus didn't look up from his work. How many refused? 3 families so far. They're calling it principled resistance. 3 out of 43. I'll take those odds. But the 3 families who refused the settlement were true believers, and true believers were dangerous. Jennifer Corso, the Channel 7 reporter who tried to interview Marcus weeks ago, ran a special segment about them. Families stand strong against lake lockout. Segment featured the Brennan family, Tom's relatives, naturally, the Hutchisons, and the Delgados. All 3 families had young children, photogenic houses, and legitimate grievances about being misled by Hartley. The story painted them as David against Marcus's Goliath. We bought our dream homes here, Michelle Hutchison said, cradling her toddler. We were promised a place where our children could swim and play and connect with nature. Now we're being told that was all a lie, but the person with the power to make it right, Mr. Webb, refuses to even consider sharing. Segment didn't mention that Marcus had never agreed to share, that the lake was his private property, or that the Hutchisons had been among the most frequent trespassers before the gate went up. It just showed a young mother with a crying child and an unspoken question. What kind of man denies children access to nature? The segment went viral. Within 24 hours, Marcus was trending on social media. Share the lake. Lake access. Community over property, Doug called with warning. The narrative's shifting again. You're becoming a symbol of selfish property owners hoarding resources. A symbol of someone who owns property and expects that ownership to be respected. True, but that's not how it's playing in the media. The human interest angle is killing us. Young families, children, dreams destroyed. People are angry on their behalf. People who don't know the facts. People rarely do. That's the problem. Doug paused. Marcus, I need to ask, is there any compromise you'd consider? Limited access for residents with children? Scheduled hours? No, even to make this go away. Especially to make this go away. I compromise once it never ends. Next it'll be teenagers, then adults. Then they'll want to expand hours, install a dock, bring boats. I know how this works, Doug. Give them an inch and they'll take the lake. That's probably true. So we stick to the plan. Property rights. No compromise. Wednesday brought unexpected support from a surprising source. The County Board of Supervisors. Patricia Rodriguez, the inspector who discovered Hartley's fraud, presented her findings at the public meeting. The local paper covered it extensively. The county was deceived by Mr. Hartley's fraudulent applications, Rodriguez told the board. Mr. Webb had no legal obligation to provide access and made no agreement to do so. The development's approval was based on false premises. While we sympathize with the affected homeowners, the county cannot and will not violate property rights to remedy a private developer's fraud. Board voted unanimously to support Marcus's property rights and referred Hartley's case to the district attorney for possible criminal prosecution. That evening, Marcus received a handwritten letter. No return address, postmarked from within the county. The handwriting was feminine, careful. "Mr. Webb, you don't know me, but I live in Riverside Estates. I wanted to thank you for standing firm. When we moved here, my husband and I were told we'd have lake access. We believed it. We paid for it. Learning it was a lie was devastating, but it wasn't your lie. It was Hartley's and Morrison's. They stole from us, not you. The settlement check helps, but more than that, knowing the truth helps. We can move forward now, make new plans, maybe find a different house with actual water access. Some of my neighbors are angry at you. I understand their anger, but it's misdirected. You didn't break any promises. You didn't owe us anything. You just owned property and expected it to be respected, which is something all of us as homeowners should understand. Thank you for not backing down. Thank you for making Hartley face consequences. And thank you for teaching me to verify promises instead of just believing them. Sincerely." A grateful neighbor, Sarah, found Marcus reading the letter on the porch, sunset painting the lake gold and orange. "Good news, perspective." He handed her the letter. "Maybe this is actually working. Maybe, but the three families who refused the settlement are planning something. The Facebook chatter suggests a PR campaign. Them, truth's on our side." Thursday morning proved Sarah right. The three families appeared on the courthouse steps with their lawyers, announcing a lawsuit against Marcus for unjust enrichment and public trust violation. The legal theories were shaky at best, but the optics were powerful. Three families with children standing together fighting for their rights. Jennifer Corso covered the press conference extensively. Tom Brennan, out on bail for the gate incident, stood beside his relatives offering support. "This is about justice," he told the camera. "About fairness. About not letting wealthy landowners hoard resources the community needs." Doug watched the coverage with professional detachment. "They're not going to win. The legal theories are nonsense, but they're going to make your life hell for 6 months while the case gets dismissed. How much is this going to cost me? $50,000 in legal fees minimum, and that's if they don't drag it out." Marcus thought about the number. $50,000 to defend property rights he'd already established. $50,000 to fight people who'd been victims of fraud, but who'd chosen to direct their anger at him instead of at the fraudster. "Do it. File motion to dismiss immediately." "Already drafted. I'll have it filed by noon." But the lawsuit was just the opening move. That afternoon, Marcus discovered someone had filed a complaint with the state environmental agency, claiming his gate was blocking access to navigable waters in violation of public trust doctrine. The claim was absurd. The lake wasn't navigable, wasn't connected to any waterways, and was entirely private property, but it triggered an investigation. Friday brought an inspector from the state environmental office, a young woman named Amanda Torres who looked apologetic before she even started talking. "Mr. Webb, I'm sorry about this. I've reviewed your property records and the complaint is clearly frivolous, but I still have to conduct the inspection. It's procedure." "I understand." "What do you need to see?" They spent an hour walking the property. Torres took photos, measurements, water samples. She documented that the lake was landlocked, had no public access history, and was clearly private property with no public trust implications. "This is going to be dismissed," she said as they returned to her car. "Whoever filed this complaint either doesn't understand environmental law or is deliberately wasting state resources to harass you." "You tell me who filed it." "I can tell you it was an anonymous complaint, but the IP address traces to the Riverside Estates Community Center." Torres shook her head. "People don't realize that fake environmental complaints are actually criminal. Filing false reports to a state agency carries serious penalties." "Will you pursue charges?" "That's up to my supervisor, but I'll be recommending it in my report." After Torres left, Marcus called Doug. "They're using every tool they can think of. Lawsuits, environmental complaints, media campaigns. What's next?" "Honestly, I'm surprised they haven't tried eminent domain." Marcus went cold. "Explain." "County or state could theoretically condemn your property for public use, force you to sell the lake access for public recreation. It's rare, it's expensive, and there'd have to be a genuine public need, but it's possible." "Can they actually do that?" "Constitutionally, yes. Practically, it's unlikely. Your property isn't blocking access to something essential like a road or utility corridor. It's recreational land. Courts are increasingly skeptical of eminent domain for private development or recreation." Doug paused. "But if someone convinced a county supervisor that there's overwhelming public need?" "Would I talk to about this?" County Board of Supervisors. 3 votes out of 5 could authorize a condemnation study. Marcus hung up and immediately started researching county board members. 5 supervisors, elected positions, all public contact information available. He spent the evening reading their voting records, their public statements, their campaign donors. 3 of them had received contributions from Richard Hartley over the years. Small amounts, nothing scandalous, but connections nonetheless. Saturday morning, Marcus got dressed in his best suit and drove to the county offices. The Saturday hours were limited, but he knew Supervisor Ellen Martinez usually worked weekends. He'd read an interview where she mentioned it. He found her in her office, reviewing documents. She looked up in surprise when he knocked. "Mr. Webb, I know who you are, the lake situation." "I have 5 minutes, Supervisor." She gestured to a chair. "I can give you 10. What's on your mind?" "I'm here to make sure you understand the facts before anyone approaches you about eminent domain." Martinez's eyebrows rose. "Has someone suggested that?" "Not yet, but I wanted you to hear my side before they try." For the next 9 minutes, Marcus laid out the entire situation: Hartley's fraud, Morrison's misconduct, the failed gate attack, the current harassment campaign. He showed her the county inspector's report, the property records, the documented timeline. Martinez listened without interrupting. When he finished, she leaned back in her chair. "Mr. Webb, I appreciate you coming to me directly. For what it's worth, I think you've been treated unfairly. You didn't ask for any of this. You just own property you inherited, and you've done nothing wrong." "Thank you. That said, I need to be honest with you. I've had 7 constituents contact me about this situation, all of them asking me to do something about the lake access. They're voters, they're organized, and in an election year, politicians pay attention to organized groups." Marcus felt his stomach tighten. "Are you saying you'd support eminent domain?" "Saying I'd have to consider it if there were enough public pressure. Not because I think it's right, but because that's how democracy works. The majority has power. The majority doesn't get to vote away my property rights. Actually, through eminent domain, they kind of do. That's the ugly truth of public use clauses." Martinez softened her voice. "Look, I don't want to condemn your property. I think it would be a terrible precedent. But if hundreds of people show up at a board meeting demanding action, if the other supervisors feel political pressure, if this becomes a referendum on public access versus private ownership, I might not be able to stop it." Marcus stood. "Then I need to make sure it doesn't come to that." Winning the public narrative. By making sure people understand this isn't about hoarding resources. It's about property rights, the rule of law, and not rewarding people who ignored both. Martinez looked skeptical. "Good luck. Public narratives are hard to control." Marcus left the county building with a new understanding. Legal victory wasn't enough. He could win every lawsuit, prove every property right, establish his ownership beyond dispute, and still lose if the county board decided political pressure outweighed legal principle. He needed allies, public support. A counter-narrative that didn't make him look like a villain. He needed to tell his story. Sarah was gardening when he got home. She took one look at his face and set down her trowel. "What happened?" "We might have a problem." He explained the eminent domain risk, Martinez's warning, the political calculus involved. Sarah listened, then surprised him by smiling. "Good. Been playing defense this whole time, responding to attacks, defending your rights. Maybe it's time to go on offense." "Meaning?" "Tell your story, the real story, not the grieving family's narrative or the selfish landowner story. The truth: you inherited family land, someone tried to steal it through fraud, and you defended what was yours." Marcus thought about this. He hated publicity, avoided attention, preferred quiet victories to public spectacles. But Sarah was right. He'd been letting others control the narrative. "How?" "You give an interview, a real one on your terms. You show people who you are. Not Marcus Webb, the lake hoarder. Marcus Webb, the man whose grandfather built something beautiful and who's protecting it for future generations." "Interview me fairly?" Sarah pulled out her phone, scrolling. "Remember that reporter from the state paper who covered the county inspector's report, Daniel Chen? His article was balanced. He included the fraud details, gave context." She looked up. "Call him, offer an exclusive interview, tell your side." Marcus took her phone, looking at the article. Chen's reporting was thorough, factual, and didn't sensationalize. No crying children, no villain imagery, just facts. "Okay, I'll call him," Daniel Chen answered on the second ring. "This is Daniel." "Chen, this is Marcus Webb, the lake property owner. I'd like to offer you an exclusive interview." There was a surprised pause. "You've been avoiding media for weeks." "Been avoiding ambush journalism." "I'm offering you a chance to hear the whole story on record, with full access to documents, evidence, and honest answers. Interested?" "When?" "Tomorrow afternoon, my property, 2 hours. Be there." Marcus hung up and looked at his wife. "This might backfire, or it might save everything." Sarah squeezed his hand. "Trust your story, Marcus. It's a good one." Sunday afternoon arrived clear and warm. Daniel Chen showed up with a photographer and a notebook, professional but curious. Marcus led them to the porch overlooking the lake. For 2 hours he talked. About his grandfather buying the land in 1947. About summers spent fishing and swimming. about his parents' anniversary celebrated on the dock, about inheriting the property and feeling the weight of 3 generations of memories. Then he talked about the fraud, the trespassing, the harassment. He showed Chen the emails, the county documents, the evidence of Hartley's lies. He explained the legal principles, the property rights, the multiple settlement offers he'd rejected. Why not just accept the money? Chen asked. $500,000 is life-changing. Marcus looked out at the lake, choosing his words carefully. Because some things aren't for sale, this lake is my family's history, my grandfather's dream, my parents' legacy. If I sell it, even part of it, I'm saying that none of that matters compared to money. That strangers have more claim to my family's past than I do. Some people would call that selfish. Some people would be wrong. Selfish is taking what doesn't belong to you and feeling entitled to it. Selfish is committing fraud to sell houses you can't deliver on. Selfish is organizing campaigns to harass someone into giving up their rights. Marcus met Chen's eyes. I'm not selfish, I'm just not a doormat, Chen wrote quickly. What about the families who believed they'd have lake access? They're victims too. They are victims of Richard Hartley's fraud. That's why I supported the settlement. They deserved compensation. But being a victim doesn't give you rights to my property. I didn't defraud them. Hartley did. Their anger should be directed at him. 3 families refused the settlement. 3 families decided that feeling righteous was more important than accepting reality. I'm sorry their children are disappointed. But disappointment isn't a legal claim. Photographer snapped pictures. Marcus on the porch, the view of the lake, the locked gate, the family photos on the mantel showing 3 generations of webs at the water. Chen's final question was direct. If you could say anything to your critics, what would it be? Marcus thought about Tom Brennan's vandalism, Morrison's threats, the midnight attack on his gate, the lawsuits and environmental complaints and Facebook campaigns. Say, I understand their frustration. They bought homes under false pretenses. They feel cheated, but they're directing their anger at the wrong person. I didn't cheat them. I didn't lie to them. I didn't take anything from them. I just refused to give up what was mine because someone else made promises they had no right to make. He paused. Property rights matter. The rule of law matters. Truth matters. And sometimes protecting those things means being called names by people who wish the law said something different. Chen closed his notebook. When can I see the property records you mentioned? I'll have my lawyer send everything. County documents, surveys, the works. You can verify every claim I made. Article ran Wednesday morning, front page of the state section. The lake that was never public. Property owner speaks out on development fraud. Chen's reporting was thorough and fair. He included the fraud details, the property history, the legal principles involved. He gave equal space to the disappointed families, but noted the facts. No agreement existed. Hartley had lied. The county had been deceived. The photo accompanying the article showed Marcus on his porch, the lake behind him, his father's fishing rod visible against the wall. The caption read, Marcus Webb at the family property his grandfather built in 1947. The response was immediate and divided. The Facebook groups exploded. The comments sections filled with debate. But something had shifted. This completely changes how I see this situation. Webb was protecting family land, not hoarding a resource. Isn't Hartley in jail? He's the real criminal here. Still think Webb should share. It's just a lake. Just a lake is someone's home, their history, their choice. Property rights exist for a reason. By Thursday, the tone had shifted enough that Supervisor Martinez called Marcus. Your interview helped. The board's been getting calls from people supporting your property rights. It's not overwhelming, but it's significant. That mean? It means I don't think eminent domain is on the table anymore. Public opinion isn't unified enough to risk the political fallout. She paused. You might have actually won this thing. Marcus hung up and found Sarah reading the newspaper, smiling. Chen called. He wants to do a follow-up about property rights in development disputes. Says editors at regional papers are interested. This good? This is the narrative shifting. You're not the villain anymore. You're the property owner who stood up to fraud and harassment. She looked up at him. You went on offense. It worked. That evening, Marcus walked down to the dock, his grandfather's dock, repaired and maintained across generations. The sun was setting, painting the water in shades of amber and rose. Herons fished in the shallows. Crickets began their evening song. For the first time in months, Marcus felt peace, not victory. The lawsuits would continue for a while, and some people would never forgive him for defending his rights. But peace in knowing he'd done the right thing, that he'd protected his family's legacy, that he'd proven property rights still mattered. His phone buzzed. Text from Doug, good news. The 3 families are dropping their lawsuit. Apparently seeing public opinion shift convinced their lawyers this was unwinnable. We'll get dismissal papers next week. Marcus smiled, typed back, send the bill, I'm good for it. He put the phone away and sat on the dock, feet dangling over the water the way his grandfather had taught him 60 years ago. The lake was quiet except for nature sounds, no jet skis, no parties, no trespassers, just family land protected and preserved. Sarah appeared at the dock's edge. "You okay?" "Better than okay." Marcus gestured for her to join him. She sat, taking his hand. They watched the sunset together, two people who'd fought for what mattered, and one not through compromise or surrender, but through standing firm on principle. The lake was theirs. The gate would stay locked, and 3 generations of memories would remain safe for future generations. That was worth every lawsuit, every sleepless night, every moment of doubt. That was worth everything. Part 5. Legacy. 3 months after Daniel Chen's article ran, Marcus received a letter from an address in Florida. The return label read, Catherine Webb Morrison. He stared at it for a long moment before opening it. "Dear Uncle Marcus, you don't know me. My father was your cousin David. He passed away when I was 12. I'm writing because I saw the news coverage about the lake property, and I wanted you to know that what you're doing matters to family you've never met. My father grew up visiting that lake every summer. He told me stories about learning to fish with your grandfather, about building the dock, about summers that seemed endless. When he was dying, he talked about those summers more than anything else, said they were the happiest memories of his life. I never got to see the lake. My father passed before he could take me, but knowing it's still there, still protected, still in the family, that means something. It means those memories weren't just stories. They were real and they're being preserved. Thank you for not selling. Thank you for standing firm. You're protecting more than property. You're protecting family history for people you'll never meet. With gratitude." Sarah found Marcus on the porch, holding the letter, staring at nothing. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong." He handed her the letter. "Everything's exactly right." She read it, tears forming. "You never mentioned David. Was 15 years older than me. Moved to Florida after college. We lost touch." Marcus looked out at the lake. "I didn't know the summers meant so much to him. They meant something to everyone who experienced them. That's what you've been protecting." "I know. But reading it from someone who never got to experience it, it makes it real in a different way." Letter was the first of several. Over the next weeks, Marcus heard from distant relatives, childhood friends, and people who'd known his family generations ago. Each letter expressed the same sentiment. Thank you for protecting what matters. The legal aftermath resolved itself gradually. Hartley pled guilty to fraud charges and paid a substantial fine in addition to the settlement to the homeowners. His development license was revoked. He sold his company and moved out of state. Bradley Morrison was disbarred after a state bar investigation confirmed he'd knowingly pursued frivolous claims and misrepresented facts to clients. The last Marcus heard, Morrison was working in his father-in-law's insurance business, a dramatic fall from his previous status as a prominent attorney. The 3 families who'd refused the settlement eventually accepted it, once their lawyers explained that continuing to fight was financially ruinous and legally hopeless. Tom Brennan served 90 days for the vandalism and gate attack, plus community service and restitution. The Riverside Estates HOA hired new leadership and officially apologized to Marcus in a written letter. Some families moved away, unable to accept the lack of lake access. Others stayed, built community pools, created new traditions. The development survived, but its identity changed. No longer the lakefront community, but simply another suburban neighborhood, and through it all the gate remained locked. But 6 months after the lawsuits ended, Marcus received a visitor who changed something fundamental. Her name was Dr. Elena Vasquez, and she represented the State Environmental Conservation Department. She arrived with official paperwork and a careful smile. "Mr. Webb, I'm here to discuss a conservation easement opportunity." Marcus gestured her toward the porch. "I'm not interested in selling or allowing public access." "I know. This isn't about access. It's about preservation." Dr. Vasquez sat, pulling out documents. "Your property contains one of the last naturally filtered spring-fed lakes in the county. The water quality is pristine. The surrounding ecosystem supports 17 species of concern, including 2 that are state-protected. Maintained it carefully." "No, that's why we're here." She handed him a brochure. "A conservation easement would legally protect your property from future development forever. You'd retain full ownership and exclusive access, but the land would be protected from subdivision, commercial use, or degradation even after you pass it to heirs." Marcus studied the brochure. "What's the catch?" "No catch. You get a substantial tax benefit for the easement donation. We conduct annual environmental monitoring, with advance notice and your permission, to ensure the ecosystem remains healthy, and you'd have the satisfaction of knowing this land will be protected forever. Would this prevent my heirs from selling? They could sell the property, but the easement would remain binding. Any future owner would be bound by the same conservation restrictions. The lake and land could never be developed or open to public access without your explicit permission. written into the easement. Sarah appeared with coffee, listening to the conversation. She met Marcus's eyes with a raised eyebrow. "Your call." "Let me think about it," Marcus said. "I'll need to review the terms with my lawyer. Of course, we're not rushing this. Good conservation takes time." After Dr. Vasquez left, Sarah sat beside Marcus. "What do you think?" "I think it solves a problem I've been worried about." "What problem?" "What happens after we're gone? We don't have children. My only living relatives are distant cousins I barely know. If something happened to us, this property would go to someone, and that someone might not care about preserving it. You'd lock it in preservation, ensure my grandfather's legacy survives my death. Isn't that what all of this has been about?" Over the next 2 months, Marcus worked with Doug and environmental attorneys to craft a conservation easement that preserved the property while maintaining his rights. The tax benefits were significant, enough to recoup all his legal expenses and then some. But that wasn't why he did it. He did it because Catherine's letter made him realize he wasn't just protecting property for himself. He was protecting memory, history, legacy for people he'd never meet, for the grandchildren of cousins he barely knew, for future generations who might want to know where their family came from. The easement was finalized in December, signed at Doug's office with Dr. Vasquez present as witness. The document was 73 pages of legal language that boiled down to a simple truth. This land would remain wild, protected, and private forever. "How does it feel?" Doug asked after the signing. Marcus thought about it. "Like finishing something my grandfather started." That Christmas, Marcus and Sarah hosted a small gathering, the first time they'd had guests at the lake in over a year. They invited Doug and his wife, Daniel Chen and his family, Sheriff Hayes, and Patricia Rodriguez from the county. They also invited Ellen Martinez, the county supervisor who'd been honest about political realities. As the sun set on Christmas Eve, Marcus stood on the dock with his guests, watching children, Chen's kids, skip stones across the water under careful supervision. "You know," Ellen Martinez said, joining him, "you could have avoided all of this by just giving them what they wanted." "I could have. Would have been easier." "Easier isn't always right," she agreed. "It isn't." She watched the children play. "For what it's worth, you changed something in this county. People pay more attention to property rights now. Developers are more careful about their claims. The county board revised regulations to require verified access agreements before developments can market water access." "Good. You made enemies, though. Some people will never forgive you for defending your rights." Marcus smiled slightly. "Some people need things to be angry about. I'm okay being their excuse." Patricia Rodriguez joined them, wine glass in hand. "The conservation easement was brilliant, by the way. You preserved this place for centuries." "That was the idea. My office is going to use your property as a case study, how private preservation can protect environmental resources better than public access sometimes." Sarah called from the porch that dinner was ready. As the group headed back, Marcus lingered on the dock for a moment. Chen's children were laughing, their voices carrying across the water. With permission, with supervision, with respect, the lake was being enjoyed the way it was meant to be. That was the difference. Not public versus private, not sharing versus hoarding, but respect versus entitlement. Permission versus presumption. Inside, over dinner, the conversation turned to the broader implications of the lake dispute. "You started something," Chen said between bites of Sarah's lasagna. "I've been contacted by property owners in 3 other states dealing with similar situations, developers promising access they don't have rights to provide. HOAs claiming prescriptive easements after a few years of use. Everyone wants to know how you fought back." "What do you tell them?" "Document everything. Know the law, don't compromise on principle, and be prepared for it to get ugly before it gets better." "That's good advice," Doug added. "Though I'd add, get a lawyer immediately." Marcus had the advantage of understanding property law from his engineering background. Most people don't. Sheriff Hayes laughed. "And don't spray paint anyone's mailbox. That tends to backfire." The evening ended with Marcus giving Chen's family a brief tour of the property. The old cabin his grandfather built, the fishing spot where 3 generations learned to cast, the oak tree with initials carved by dozens of Webb family members dating back to 1952. "This is special," Chen said, photographing the carved initials. "This is what you were protecting." "This is memory made physical," Marcus corrected. "Property isn't just land and water, it's connection, legacy. The proof that people existed and mattered and built something lasting. I quote you on that. Only if you promise not to make me sound more philosophical than I am. I'm just a guy who didn't want to lose his lake." Chen smiled. "You're a guy who understood that some fights are worth having. That's more rare than you think." After the guests left, Marcus and Sarah cleaned up in comfortable silence. The house smelled like pine from the small Christmas tree and cinnamon from the cookies Sarah had made. "Good evening," Sarah asked, drying dishes, best one in a long time. Marcus looked out the kitchen window at the lake, moonlit and peaceful. I was thinking about Catherine's letter about David. What about him? He spent summers here as a child, built memories, treasured them his whole life, and his daughter never got to experience them because he died too young. Marcus set down the dish he was washing. But because we fought to keep this place, his daughter knows those memories were real. That the stories her father told were true. That there's a place in the world that holds her family's history. That matters to you. It's the only thing that matters. Everything else, the lawsuits, the protests, the media coverage, that was just noise. But preserving this place so Catherine's children or her children's children might someday stand on this dock and understand where they came from, that's real. Sarah hugged him from behind, resting her head against his shoulder. Your grandfather would be proud. I hope so. He built something worth protecting. I just made sure it stayed protected. They stood at the window for a long time, watching the lake reflect the winter moon. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called. The water lapped gently against the shore. The world turned, seasons changed, but this place remained, protected, preserved, permanent. Years later, Marcus would think back on the lake battle as the defining period of his life. Not because of the conflict, but because of what it revealed. That some things are worth fighting for, that property rights matter, that standing firm on principle, even when it's hard, even when you're called names, even when you're alone, is always the right choice. The gate stayed locked. The conservation easement remained in force. And the lake stayed in the Webb family, protected for generations who hadn't been born yet. In his final years, Marcus would add his own initials to the oak tree, MW 2025, below his grandfather's initials from 1947. A century of family, carved in wood, standing beside a lake that represented everything worth preserving. The day Marcus passed away at 81, Catherine and her children were at his bedside. Sarah had contacted them months earlier, sensing the end was near. They'd driven from Florida to say goodbye and to thank him one final time for protecting the place that connected them all. Catherine's daughter, a teenager named